You know, last time I thought I was covering the most obscure Xeno game when I covered Xenosaga Freaks. However, today's game might be even more obscure as I look at the prequel story released on the now defunct Vodafone Live service. So without further ado, let's dive into 2004's Xenosaga Pied Piper on the mobile phone. Now just a reminder that the Xenosaga Pied Piper retrospective was brought to you by lovely patrons like Cameron Strauss, Black Liquid SRW, Noah Morgan, and newcomers Echolocation and Richnath192. For as little as $3 a month, you can get your name shouted out at the start of every Xenosaga video, as well as access to bonus behind the scenes content, link in the description below. As I established in the Xenosaga Episode 2 retrospective, the original script for the game, written by Monolithsoft CEO Tetsuya Takahashi and his wife Kaori Tanaka, would be heavily altered by the game's development team to make it into a workable script. This resulted in a lot of cut content, most of it pertaining to the backstory of characters outside the main duo of Junior and Momo. One such of these characters would be the cyborg Ziggy, whose backstory had briefly been mentioned in Xenosaga Episode 1, but not thoroughly explored in any meaningful way. Thus Takahashi decided to use Ziggy's backstory as a script for a new mobile game. Following the success of Xenosaga Episode 1, Takahashi greatly decided to expand the Xenosaga brand outside of just the PlayStation 2 games. This would include getting a Xenosaga anime commissioned, as well as attempting to get series mascot Cosmos to appear in other games, something that continues to this day. As for this mobile game, with the team inexperienced in mobile game development, the task of making the game would fall to the mobile development division of Namco. Despite not developing the game, Takahashi and Tanaka would develop the script using the cut content from Xenosaga Episode 2 as a basis. With the story focusing around a serial killer who leads people to willingly take their own life, the team drew parallels with the famous German fable of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Thus the title Xenosaga Pied Piper would be chosen as the game's name. Xenosaga Pied Piper would be announced in July 2004 for the mobile phone multimedia portal service Vodafone Live. The game would initially come out in 6 parts, with the final chapter coming out on October 13, 2004. With sales of the game not being too high, Namco would later, in 2006, release the game on the rival multimedia portal service of iMode. With mobile gaming yet to truly take off in the West, Namco would not pursue a localization of the game. Now, when I make these retrospectives, I try my very best to play every game to completion before publishing. This includes the Japanese exclusive titles like Tales of Rebirth and Xenosaga Freaks, which I actually played physical versions of. However, there is no way I'm jumping through the hoops to get this game. First, while iMode is still in operation until 2026, I have no idea if Xenosaga Pied Piper is still available in the store. Second, even if the game is there, I would need a Japanese phone from the era to play it, plus be in Japan as the iMode service doesn't work in Australia. The only other option is to buy a phone with the game pre-installed, and I'm not about to scale the internet for one. So for this retrospective, I'll be watching a playthrough of the game done by the user Keiju on YouTube, and then giving my thoughts on what I see. The story takes place 100 years before the events of the Xenosaga Trilogy on the planet Abraxas, which later comes to be known as the planet Micdom. Here we meet a young boy playing around in the UMN, a virtual reality space, unaware that he's being watched in virtual space by a mysterious robed figure. We then jump to the local Galaxy Federation police station where we meet Captain Yan Sawa, aka Ziggy, as he lands on the roof of the station and is escorted inside by his subordinate Eric Weber. Eric informs Yan about a large-scale meeting occurring between the Galaxy Federation and the immigrant fleet. However, things are in dire strait following the kidnapping of several goodwill ambassadors inside the UMN, an act which both Yan and Eric suspect the mysterious figure Voyager is behind due to the complexity of the digital security protecting the ambassadors. Yan decides to dive into the UMN to scout out the situation, but soon as his colleagues of Melisse Orthus and the Realian Lactus have already dived in and are attempting to rescue the ambassadors. Arriving in the operating room, Yan scolds operator Mikhail Ortman for allowing Lactus and Melisse to dive in early before getting Mikhail to set him up to dive into the UMN too. Just before Yan dives into the UMN, Mikhail informs Yan that according to the brain scans of the Goodwill ambassadors, none of them seem to be resisting escaping the UMN, leading to Yan wondering if they're not being held against their own will. Meanwhile, inside the virtual UMN space, we find Melisse and Lactus alongside their robot buddy Bugs, giving orders to a squadron of police officers to spread out and find the ambassadors. Soon into their search, the group comes across a security tank which they engage as a group. Against Melisse's orders, several of the officers attack the tank and are gunned down and deleted. Realising that the officers are now dead in reality, Melisse begins to have a panic attack, leading to Lactus to force Melisse to snap out of it and fight the tank. The three engage the tank and quickly find themselves in dire straits when Yan finally catches up and joins the group. Together the four destroy the tank and move on. Soon after moving on, the group run into dead police officers now reappearing as zombies. While seeing her dead comrades triggers another traumatic breakdown for Melise, Jan is able to dispatch the monsters once again and tells Melise to get her act together, otherwise she will be killed too. Arriving at the location of the ambassadors, the four are surprised to find an empty room. Looking around, the four suddenly find themselves trapped and under attack by a powerful digital virus. Feeling like he has no other choice, Eric decides to lock himself into the UMN to open up a way for the four to escape and log out. However, soon after joining, Eric is attacked by the virus and deleted. Enraged by the loss of Eric, the group attack the virus and are able to destroy it. While the group is still in shock over Eric's death, a new path opens up, and suspecting that the ambassadors are located down there, they decide to continue on their journey. At the base of the stairs, the group find the ambassadors, who turn out to be a bunch of children. One of the ambassadors suddenly begins quoting lines from the Book of Revelations in the Bible, and then the four notice she has a self-delete switch on her necklace. The four call on Maga to immediately log the ambassadors out, but they are not fast enough as the ambassador activates the necklace, destroying her and the rest of the children. Back in reality, the group are left in disbelief as what had just happened, and why the ambassadors willingly took their own lives. While Maga does more investigations, Jan travels to the hospital to check on Eric's condition. There, Jan meets a doctor by the name of Sharon Rosa, who takes Jin to see Eric, whose condition continues to deteriorate. Despite the doctor's best efforts, Eric does not make it and is pronounced dead. Despite being unable to save Eric's life, Jan thanks Sharon for doing her best and returns back to the police station. Later that night, Sharon is preparing Eric's body for disposal, when suddenly out of nowhere, Eric comes back to life. He proceeds to get out of the coffin and begins to walk towards the exit. Sharon, who is somewhat in shock at what is happening, calls on the other doctors to come into her location as she follows Eric to the exit. At the exit, Sharon orders Eric not to leave, however Eric simply replies no problem and then walks out. The story then continues from there, and for the full story breakdown, you either have the choice of reading the translated game script, or uniquely in this case, reading a multi-part manga written by fans, which I have also linked below. As a game developed for the mobile platforms in the 2000s, Xenosaga Piper is definitely not the visual masterpiece like its PS2 counterparts, as the game is locked to the 176 by 220 screen resolution of phones of that era. Alongside being probably the most graphically inferior Xeno game ever made, Piper also doesn't particularly play that well. With mobile phones of the era not being optimised for gaming, games like Piper have noticeable stutter when moving about, alongside pretty horrible controls in the form of the mobile number pad and arrow keys. To be honest, I don't really know why they didn't make this game for the Game Boy Advance, which not only would have run the game smoother, it would also make the game way more accessible to play in 2023. Despite my issues with gaming on old school mobile phones, Xenosaga Piper is mostly able to overcome the limitations of mobile games as, much like its PS2 counterparts, it is a turn-based JRPG. Throughout the game, you will navigate both the real-world and virtual UMN constructs as you attempt to track down the elusive serial killer Voyager, while at the same time attempting to protect the Federation and immigrant fleet peace talks. For the most part, the real world mostly consists of dialogue exchanges between the main characters, with the occasional still image replacing the gameplay screen to give a bit more visual flair to the cutscenes. While the cutscenes are a far cry from the incredible cinematics of the Xenosaga Trilogy, they do a decent job in conveying the story. As for the more gameplay side of things, we need to look to the UMN parts of the game. Throughout the game, Jan and his team will make several dives into virtual UMN constructs on their quest to stop Voyager. Inside these virtual worlds, the team will encounter hostile programs which they must face in battle. Battles for the most part feel very similar to how they did in Xenosaga Episode 1, with classic systems like the AP counter, boost gauge, and turn bonuses all making their return. Arguably the biggest change from Episode 1's combat is the fact that battles now take place in first person, in a similar manner to games like Earthbound and Etrian Odyssey. Despite the first person angle, everything else is mostly the same as with Episode 1, with your party being limited to a group of 3, as well as the combo system returning, which characters can perform up to 3 hits on their turn, with the third hit being a more powerful special attack. Alongside the classic combo system, characters can also use items as well as ether spells to get the upper hand in combat. To finish up this short summary of the game, we need to talk about the soundscape. As you'd expect, the game has no voice acting, and for that matter, it's pretty light on sound effects too, which is why I have been playing raw audio files from Keiju's Let's Play as background music here. Speaking about the OST, it's pretty short, with the game reusing the same 4 or so tracks across the whole game, for when the mood is sad, happy, mysterious, etc. These tracks aren't exactly standouts, as they sound more like phone alarms than music for a video game. As a result, I think I can quite confidently say that this is the weakest soundtrack in the series, and that includes Xenosaga Freaks. So, for the most part, I've been kind of trashing on Xenosaga Piper, as it's really not a game I would recommend playing. The game is very text heavy like Xenosaga Episode 1 and 2, thus it once again feels like Monolithsoft is putting story above gameplay. Despite all my negatives aimed at this game, I can see why, back in 2004, it would be a great budget way for someone to experience the Xenosaga series without a PS2. Despite all the hardware limitations, the game still does in a lot of ways feel like a Xenosaga game both in gameplay and story. On the topic of story, it has to be the game's best aspect. The game does raise some interesting themes, such as how the development of new technology changes how humanity sees its place in the world. We also get to see a time period not previously seen in the trilogy, as we meet characters like Dmitry Yuriev at a much younger age. It also really deepens the backstories of characters like Ziggy and Voyager, who are often deprived of a lot of screen time in the main trilogy over characters like Junior and Shion. Let's just say the final confrontation between Ziggy and Voyager in Xenosaga Episode 3 is made loads better knowing the backstory of these two characters later in this game. Well, we've still got a few more obscure Xeno games to get through after Xenosaga Pied Piper, so join me next time as I look at the Nintendo DS remake of Xenosaga Episode 1 and 2.